Today it was Prime Minister's questions, and as always, tensions were high. Keir Starmer once again failed to answer the questions and was ruthlessly grilled. In today's video, we will watch and react to a ferocious row erupted as Starmer was called out for not answering any questions. But before we dive in, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot. Thank you. Take a look at this.
The Ukraine family scheme. And in total, over 200,000 Ukrainians, mostly women, children and the elderly, have found sanctuary in the UK from Putin's war. However, a family of 6 from Gaza have applied to live in Britain using this scheme, and a judge has now ruled in their favour. This is not what the scheme was designed to do. This decision is completely wrong. It cannot be allowed to stand. Is the government planning to appeal on any points of law? And if so, which ones?
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government, according to the legal framework of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. It should be Parliament that makes the rules on immigration. It should be the government that makes the policy. That is the principle, and the Home Secretary is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer the question. If he plans to appeal, then the appeal may be unsuccessful and the law will need to be changed. And if he does not appeal, the law definitely will need to be changed. He talks about a decision made under the last government. It was not made by the last government, it was made by the courts. The issue we are discussing today is about judicial decisions. We cannot be in a situation where we allow enormous numbers of people to exploit our laws in this way. There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got her team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister was on top of his brief, perhaps he'd be able to answer some questions. Given this crazy decision and so many others, new legislation is needed to clarify the right to a family life in Article 8. I'm not talking about what he just said. I know Labour MPs don't understand much of what they're saying, but the Prime Minister literally wrote a book on the European Convention on Human Rights. This is a situation where we need to put our national interest before the ECHR. Does he agree that we should legislate even if lawyers warn that this might be incompatible with human rights law?
She complains about scripted answers and questions. Her script doesn't allow her to listen to the answer.
Prime Minister.
She asked me if we're going to change the law and close the loophole in question 1. I said yes. She asked me again in question 2, and I said yes. She asked me again in question 3. It's still yes.
Mr. Speaker, he didn't listen to question 1. I asked if he would appeal the decision. He did not answer that. He's not listening. He's too busy defending the international human rights law framework. Mr. Speaker, this case has arisen because a Palestinian came to the UK from Gaza in 2007. He is now a British citizen. This is precisely why we need to break the conveyor belt from arriving in the UK to acquiring indefinite leave to remain and then a British passport, and now a right to bring 6 family members here as well. Just last week, the Prime Minister bizarrely claimed that a British passport was not a pull factor for those coming to the UK. Will he now support our plans to toughen the process on indefinite leave to remain and make getting a British passport a privilege, not a right?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, they presided over record high levels of immigration. Reached nearly 1 million. It was a one-nation experiment in open borders. And she was the cheerleader. She was the one campaigning for more people to come and thanking her own side when they supported her campaign. So before she lectures us, I think she needs to reflect on her own record here.
Mr. Speaker, he is the Prime Minister now. The people out there want to know what he is going to do about the situation. He needs to spend less time whining about the last government and do his job. I thought, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister and I both agreed that Israel had a right to defend herself. Yet the judge in this case noted that the family were facing a humanitarian crisis, and I quote, as a consequence of the Israeli government's indiscriminate attempts to eliminate Hamas, and government lawyers accepted this. Is the Prime Minister allowing lawyers to change the position on Israel? And was this because of advice from the Attorney General? And if not, why on earth did government lawyers accept the argument that Israeli actions were indiscriminate?
Prime Minister.
They put the complete opposite argument. She talks about on top of her breath. She has no idea what she's talking about. I'll tell her again. We need to change the law. That's why the Home Secretary is already closing the gap. I know the script doesn't allow any adaptation, but this is getting tedious.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has not read the judgment. I suggest that he does. There are very serious questions now. Being asked about the Attorney General, the Prime Minister's personal friend and donor. Even Labour ministers are concerned. One Labour peer, Lord Glassman, has called him the absolute archetype of an arrogant progressive fool. Yeah. If we are serious about protecting our borders, we need to make sure we appoint people who believe in our country and everything we stand for. It is not clear the Attorney General does. The government is now recruiting a new Chief Inspector of Borders who lives in Finland and wants to work from home. This is not serious. Why should the British public put up with this?
Prime Minister.
The individual in question was appointed in 2019 by the last government to a senior position. He then worked for 5 years from Finland. We've changed that, and he's now going to be working from the United Kingdom full-time. Finland under them. And she talks about the Attorney General. She sat round the cabinet table with an attorney who was later sacked for breaching national security.
Charlotte Nettles.
What are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. In some other news, Reform MPs have remained steadfast in their commitment to cracking down on illegal immigration and ensuring the deportation of foreign criminals. They have made it clear that if and when they come to power, they will take decisive action to strengthen border security and enforce immigration laws more strictly than ever before. Their stance has sparked intense debate across the political spectrum, with strong support from their base and fierce opposition from critics who argue that such measures are too extreme. Reform UK leader Richard Tice goes head-to-head with a pair of woke radio hosts who challenge his tough stance on deportations. Tice doesn't hold back as he passionately defends his party's position, exposing what he sees as the hypocrisy and weakness of mainstream politicians when it comes to immigration policy. Have a watch of this.
The British people have had enough of this nonsense.
What do you do to people who come from a country where you can't deport them back? That seems to be the critical issue when it comes to immigration in this country. People come to this country And they might either come illegally and therefore required to be sent back, or they commit a crime when they are in this country. Not every country they come from you can send them back to. What happens then?
Well, I fundamentally don't accept that as a principle. Every single foreign criminal should be deported. No ifs, no buts. They haven't got any rights to stay. With rights comes responsibilities, and they've broken the law, and that's it. Thank you very much. You're no longer welcome in the United Kingdom, and you go back to where you came from. We have to be robust and crystal
even if that
clear.
country is deemed unsafe.
That is their problem. It's not our problem. We have to be absolutely robust on this. Our job as as any government's job is to protect the United Kingdom, protect and defend British citizen. That's the responsibility. And recent governments, both Tory and Labour, have utterly failed in that core responsibility.
And if the overarching legal requirements, European Court of Human Rights,
well, we should leave that. We need to leave the ECHR anyway, as exposed by this another ludicrous case where chicken nuggets for a youngster is more important than the protection of British citizens.
What happens if they're not criminals? You were very specific there in the answer. You said if they are criminals, we will deport them. But what if they're not criminals? What if they are people who arrive here illegally on small boats? They say, can't deport me back to my country because I'm at risk. What do you do with those people?
Well, if they're here illegally, then yes, they have to be removed. That's the reality. But the first key is to stop people coming. Then you've got to catch those who are here illegally. And look, the Home Office is trying. But if they're going to be transparent about the data, let's also find out from which countries are they arresting people, so that we know exactly, which of the countries who are mainly committing the crimes, mainly committing illegal acts, illegal working, so we know more about the data.
Can I ask you a question on that? Because I'm interested in that. Say someone comes from Afghanistan through Europe, and they arrive in this country illegally. They come on a small boat, so that's an illegal entry to this country. In your view, should they be entitled to claim asylum in this country?
No, because there is a legal way to claim asylum, and we have given asylum to many, many people from Afghanistan who helped our forces when they were serving over there.
But there aren't proper legal routes for people to come from these countries. That's what we put.
No, we have to be crystal clear. The whole world does not have a legal right to apply for asylum to the United Kingdom, right? The role of government is to defend and protect British citizens. Yes, we have a long-standing record of welcoming, on average, 20 to 30,000 asylum seekers over many decades. That number has now essentially soared. And I come back to the key point. You cannot ask the British people to become poorer, for our quality of life to deteriorate, for our public services to be under unacceptable pressure because of the pressure from people coming here either illegally or legally from overseas, when we're not training up our own people.
So someone who comes from Afghanistan, who in the last 20 years would have been granted asylum in this country because of where they've come from, but even if they've come via small boats, your position would be, if you come via a small boat...
You've come illegally.
You're out.
Of course.
And you'd send them back to Afghanistan.
You cannot accept illegality. Otherwise, you end up in a completely
So would you do a
lawless
Donald
state.
Trump? Would you and say Afghanistan said we don't want them back? Would you do what Trump did with Colombia? You put them on a plane and send them back?
It's very simple. You can go into individual cases. The fundamental principle is people who come here illegally do not have the right to work here, and they do not have the right to stay here. And that is the consensus view of the vast, vast majority of the British people. And what the UK needs is a government that is prepared to stand up for the British people and enact the law.
Even if the law of the world or international law suggests that if someone claims asylum, you have to give got to grant them asylum, or at least consider their asylum.
This is the key difference, isn't it? What is more important?
Yeah.
Sovereign domestic law or international law from the globalists? And I tell you what, the critical thing is sovereign domestic law enforced by our own politicians and our own authorities.
Just let's be very clear. If a country says, I won't accept these people back, they're nothing to do with my country anymore, you're saying you would charter a plane, send them back anyway?
Yes.
Practically, what happens when they don't take the plane?
Well, we'll have to review that when we come into it.
But the point is, in opposition, you can say this stuff, but in practical reality, there's a bunch of people on a plane, the plane is in the air, the country's saying you can't land here. What do you do? What is the position?
Well, let's review that when we get to it.
What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments section below, and make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content.